Good morning and welcome. My name is Kurt Volker. I am here at the Center for European Policy Analysis, CEPA, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this conversation with the Foreign Minister of Ukraine, Dmytro Kuleba. As you know, CEPA is one of the leading think tanks in Washington that is focused particularly on Central and Eastern Europe and on transatlantic matters. And we are delighted to offer this conversation to you. The conversation will be led by the President and CEO of CEPA, Alina Polyakova. As I think many of you know, I was the US Special Representative for Ukraine negotiations from 2017 to 2019. Spent a lot of time and a lot of visits to that country. And I came away from that experience firmly convinced that the sovereignty and territorial integrity, the prosperity and the security of Ukraine are a fundamental interest of the United States and of the West. And we have a new opportunity with a new administration in Washington to refocus our policies toward those objectives. And I'm looking very much forward to this conversation with the Foreign Minister and with Alina. Foreign Minister Kuleba joined the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry in the early 2000s, but then he moved on. He was the head of a foundation of UART for cultural diplomacy. He has written a book about fake news and the importance of combating fake news. He was Ukraine's ambassador to the European Union and is now Deputy Prime Minister as well as Foreign Minister. So with that, allow me to turn it over to our chief at CEPA, Alina Polyakova.
Well, thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Ambassador Volker, for that introduction. And it's really my honor to be able to moderate and lead this conversation with Minister Kuleba. As many of you know on the call, CEPA has been in the forefront of highlighting, raising awareness of Russian aggression against Ukraine and its neighbors. One of the issues we work tirelessly is to ensure transatlantic cooperation, to push back against continued Russian aggression against Western allies, and certainly first and foremost Ukraine, which has now for many years been the primary target and also the victim of Russia's aggressive foreign policy, which has now cost more than 13,000 lives of Ukrainian people and has resulted in the continued militarization, occupation of Ukraine's Crimea and also the Donbass. It's certainly a difficult situation that Ukraine, its government and its people continue to face. But with the new administration now a little over a month in the United States, this is an opportunity and perhaps a moment to re-engage and to work towards peace, prosperity, and growth in Ukraine while supporting Ukraine's ability to continue to defend itself against Moscow. So for that reason, it's really my pleasure to have this important conversation with Minister Kuleba. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to CEPA. Without further ado, let me start with a broad question. What do you think, now that we have Joe Biden inaugurated, his administration is in place, we have some of the key positions, what should be the priorities for the US-Ukraine bilateral relationship today?
Thank you. Thank you all for being with us now and for inviting me to speak at CEPA. You have a unique expertise for Central Europe, for Ukraine. Kurt has particularly enlightening expertise when it comes to Ukrainian affairs and to the conflict with Russia. He had the pleasure of negotiating with some prominent Russian representatives and to look deep in their eyes. So it's when we speak about Ukraine and this part of Europe, it's really important to have a deep understanding of the region and of all the nuances of what is happening here in this part of Europe. Answering your question, well, point one is, of course, security. I don't think I will surprise anyone. We expect from the new administration continued engagement on security track. It was very reassuring to hear President Biden address the Munich Security Conference and mention the Russian aggression against Ukraine and the need to support territorial integrity of Ukraine. The message was clear, it was heard and appreciated. So issue number one is continued, and I would even say more energetic engagement with Ukraine on security track. And that involves everything starting from Normandy format talks where Russia, Ukraine, Germany, and France negotiate, and ending up with the support extended to our armed forces and to the modernization of our defense and security sectors, where the United States have been particularly helpful and efficient. Speaking about security, I want to make one thing very clear. One of the lessons since 2014 is that if you want to motivate, I would say, Russia to make a move, you have to act fast and you have to be very well targeted. So I believe that this administration, it would be in the best interests of the new US administration to show its leadership globally, to give a clear evidence to the message that America is back. It would be to move. Sorry, I have a call from President's office, but someone else will reply to that. So the message is you have to act fast. You cannot wait. You cannot wait and see, because the more you wait, the more you consider the situation, the more chances Russia gets to get adapted to the new reality, to the new modus vivendi. And it gets more difficult to deal with Russia as they get adapted to new reality. This is one of the lessons that I could share straight away when it comes to the security bloc. The second issue is, of course, transatlantic unity. When we speak about transatlantic unity, of course, we mean we mean area beyond NATO borders, and that includes not only allies but also those countries which share the same principles and values as the United States across the ocean, and Ukraine is certainly one of them. So we expect from the new administration to demonstrate leadership in bringing all pieces of transatlantic space together and strengthening this alliance in a global competition and a global struggle that is unfolding. Because what we see globally is basically that the world is getting shaped in a way where big blocks are being formed around some centers of power, and Ukraine definitely belongs to the transatlantic space and transatlantic unity. So we expect the help and the support of the United States in our further engagement with NATO, in our integration, granting us membership action plan by the allies, and moving forward towards strengthening the transatlantic space. The third element is trade and business engagement. We have to. Ukraine has the association agreement with the European Union. We introduce EU business rules here in Ukraine and create conditions for investments and for business projects. There are many things happening, many new things happening, including in the field of energy. And I believe that this is where the United States and Ukraine could build a synergy to really strengthen energy security in Europe. Ukraine is indispensable for ensuring energy security of Europe. And together with the United States, we can do a lot, and we can create the right balances in the region. And finally, we will be looking forward to engaging deeper with the United States on transforming our country, on introducing best practices, strengthening the rule of law, eradicating corruption, All these things, they're not unique for the world, for many countries. But here in Ukraine, we are committed to building an efficient state machinery, an efficient country, because we also understand that this is one of the prerequisites of our success in a war against Russia. We have to be strong, we have to be successful, we have to be efficient to be able to counter Russian aggression that is taking place on so many fronts.
Well, Mr. Minister, thank you. That was a tour de force of an overview, and you've outlined some very concrete strategic priorities. Let me follow up on a few things you mentioned. On the security front, this is your top priority. I think it's very obvious, as you said, why ensuring Ukraine's territorial integrity and ensuring no further Russian incursion or aggression against Ukraine is your top concern. And as you mentioned at the Munich Security Conference just last week, President Biden did say that standing up for sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine remains a vital concern for Europe and the United States. But the Normandy process, which has not officially or formally involved the US, seems to have stalled. So what would you like to see the transatlantic community, the United States and Europe do to work towards the goal that President Biden set out in his Munich speech last week?
I would be happy to see the United States in the Normandy format. In fact, I would like to recall that at the very early stage of the Russian aggression, when Russia was attempting to annex Crimea in early 2014, the so-called Geneva format was established, and a number of contacts were held with the involvement of the United States. Later on, the Normandy format was set up in France, and that did not include Washington. Historians will, I'm sure, find each and every detail of what had happened then. But I think it's more than natural for the United States to be a full-fledged part of the settlement process. However, at the same time, I mean, the United States is a country that has luxury of playing a role in any process globally without being a formal part of any format. So I mean that if we cannot guarantee consensus of existing members of the Normandy format, which I guess it would be hard for Mr. Putin to accept the United States at the table. This does not mean that America cannot do what it can. It has enough of powers and capacity to play a crucial role in the process. What we've seen over these years is that Europe, to which Ukraine belongs, is of course interested in stability and in peace in Ukraine. It supports Ukraine in its struggle against Russian aggression, but we need more, I would say, political power to change the status quo. And in our view, the source of that political power is the United States of America. And if the message "America is back" becomes a real kind of message to the world, then there is no better place to show that America is back than Ukraine. This is where you can show that you are back and you're fixing the most difficult global problems.
Well, I think as you certainly know, the audience is likely aware, there continues to be high bipartisan support, certainly in the US Congress, for ensuring Ukraine's territorial integrity, stability, and to help Ukraine invest in its military modernization, especially when it comes to defending itself in the Donbass, and ensuring a continued non-recognition, of course, of Russia's illegal occupation, militarization of Crimea, and the many security challenges that presents to the United States and to NATO in the Black Sea, in the broader Black Sea security zone. I have a question now from our colleague at Fox News, Rich Edson, which goes directly to the third point you outlined regarding energy security. And Rich Edson is asking the following question. You've written that President Biden should use all means at his disposal to prevent the completion of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. This obviously has been an incredibly contentious issue in the transatlantic relationship and continues to drive a wedge between the United States and its allies. So Mr. Edson's question is, do you believe this administration is doing that? And if not, do you have confidence that it will?
The messages we are hearing from the new administration are very reassuring, and they emphasize the continuity and the policy of non-acceptance of Nord Stream 2. I believe we need some more time to see whether reassuring messages will be followed with by equally reassuring decisions and steps taken. Because in the end, the very nature of the Nord Stream 2 is very simple. If it gets completed, there can be only one conclusion, that the action taken was insufficient to prevent it from being completed. That's very simple. It's not something that we will have to wait for, we will have to guess whether we are successful or not. If it's not completed, the policy was effective, and all necessary means, all means were used to prevent it from being completed. If it is completed, then someone did not enough. That's the simple reality of this project. But the United States have been very firm on this project in the previous years. Nord Stream 2 is a painful story. I hate being at odds with Germany over this project, but they have their national interests, we have ours, and we believe that Nord Stream 2 is undermining broad European security. And I do not mean only energy security. I speak in a much broader sense.
Well, certainly there's no doubt that the project has been incredibly divisive for Europe internally, not just divisive for the transatlantic relationship, but there's opposition to, strong opposition to the project from within European member states as well. And so in terms of European security, as you said, in broad terms, this project certainly has not led to great cohesion on transatlantic policy or just broader European policy. If I could ask a follow-up question on Nord Stream 2, because I think this is such a important topic, and it's quickly becoming, I think, a foreign policy test for the new US administration. For our audience that is tuning in, that may not be aware about the details of the project and what it might mean, what would it mean for Ukraine in terms of Ukraine's ability to prosper, grow, develop economically if Nord Stream 2 were completed, meaning if our policy to stop it fails? What would that mean for Ukraine?
With your permission, I will start with Europe, and not because there are national interests of my country, but there are also European interests, which are part of my national interests. The overall strategy of Europe was to diversify the supply of energy, to diversify in terms of sources of supply, and to diversify in terms of technology that is being used to produce energy, to satisfy the growing need. So first, Nord Stream 2 does not help to diversify supplies, because it further connects Europe to Russia as a supplier of gas. So it goes against the strategy, and it goes against the interests of diversifying energy supply and making it more safe for Europe. And in that sense, of course, Russia is gaining a lot. a lot more control over energy security in Europe. So this goes against the interests of Europe, and this is why, as you rightly mentioned, this project caused so many divisions in Europe itself and even in Germany. I mean, I respect the interests of Germany and the position they have, but again, I believe we should look much broadly at the matter. Coming to the interests, specifically to the interests of Ukraine. If Nord Stream 2 is completed, we will most probably receive an additional guarantee brokered by our European EU partners, a guarantee from Russia that it will continue to transit Russian gas through Ukrainian pipeline for a couple of more years. The problem with it is that we cannot believe in any Russian guarantees since 2014. And the loss of transit of Russian gas through Ukraine will not only mean the loss of money paid for that transit, that's more or less, that could be remedied, but it means that the energy security of Europe, of Ukraine, will be weakened. Because one of the reasons why that contains Russia in Ukraine is the need to safeguard and to ensure safety of the infrastructure needed to supply Russian gas to the European Union. So the completion of Nord Stream 2 will eventually mean the end of Russian transit of gas, of the transit of Russian gas through Ukraine, which will undermine national security of my country. And I would like to wrap up by saying that the whole Nord Stream project, including its first line, because we are now discussing the second one, was designed some years ago by President Putin and his people to get rid of Ukraine, not to depend on Ukraine on the transit of gas to Europe. And it was not, from the very beginning, it was rather political than economic project.
One of the issues that we work to emphasize at SIPA as well is that Nord Stream 2 is not a commercial project, that, as you said, it is much more of a geopolitical and strategic project by Russia and, of course, Gazprom, the Russian-owned gas monopoly, to gain a foothold in European politics and policy, and, of course, first and foremost, to achieve its strategic goal of undermining Ukraine in all the ways possible, including economically and in terms of energy security. So thank you for elaborating on what the consequences would be if the Nord Stream 2 pipeline proceeds. I want to take into a different direction now, as we're having some questions coming in from our audience. And those of you who are joining, if you want to pose a question, please use the Q&A function and we'll do our best to work you in. This question comes from a friend and colleague in Germany, Susan Stewart of the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. And she's asking a slightly different question. In the past, there have been some announcements coming from the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry about a new emphasis by Ukraine on relations with Asian countries. What does this emphasis consist of, and what will be the potential implications for Ukraine's relations with the United States?
Well, thank you for that question. Asia is a topic that I can spend hours talking about. We know the rules of the game, and I mentioned in the beginning the global struggle that is unfolding between major players. We see what is happening, who is doing what. But historically, we had very good relations with Asian countries. They are buying our food, grain, sunflower oil in large quantities. We are big exporters to Asian countries. Asian students from Asia study in Ukraine. We do a lot of trade with them. We have a lot of military technical cooperation with them. Many, when they hear Asia, they immediately imagine China. However, I would like to emphasize that Asia is very diverse. There are many countries which, with whom we enjoy great relations. And one of the first initiatives that I came up with after being appointed as foreign minister was to design a clear Ukrainian strategy for Asia. Because we need a strategic, this is a complicated region where many interests intersect, and we need a clear strategy to play by rules, to get benefits for my country, while appreciating, while not crossing the red lines, which would have negative implications for our relations with friends and strategic partners in other parts of the world. So we will be deepening our relations with Asian countries, but we will remain a European country with strong transatlantic bonds with the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. I mean, certainly there's no question that China is a top priority for this administration as well as for the European Union, and Ukraine's contribution to forging a more cohesive strategic approach to managing China, I think, will be very critical in the years ahead. We certainly need all of our democratic allies on board in order to counter and manage and also compete with China in many, many sectors, including the economic and trade sectors. So thank you for outlining that. I want to follow up with a question from our audience as well, and one that I wanted to ask you too, regarding Ukraine's reform process and the relationship between the reforms already happening in Ukraine and Ukraine's foreign policy agenda. And so the main question is, of course, that there's no secret that President Joe Biden knows Ukraine very well. When he was vice president, Ukraine was a top priority for him. And we know that he very much cares about ensuring Ukraine's sovereignty and integrity and pushing back against Russian aggression. But this administration will also likely look at many strategic foreign policy questions through the lens of anti-corruption reforms, judicial reforms, and broader democracy issues. So how is the reform process that's ongoing in Ukraine going? And to what extent do you see foreign policy implications from that perspectives?
Well, you know, Ukraine has been implementing reforms and has been transforming itself in the last years, while at the same fighting a war against Russia, a real war. And I think this makes Ukraine pretty unique and successful because we succeeded in changing many spheres of our life, of our kind of state machinery, and narrow the space for corruption, while at the same time spending huge resources on defense and security, on protecting ourselves. So point one, I believe that Ukraine has to be, commended for this effort. We never used the war as an excuse for not reforming, for not changing. Reforms are absolutely crucial. But I want to make one thing clear, and I hope that I will not be misinterpreted on this. Ukraine deserves support irrespective of the pace and the depth of reforms. I'm not trying to say that reforms are not necessary. I would like again to make a clear disclaimer. Reforms are essential, and we have to focus on continuing reforming the country, eradicating corruption, strengthening the rule of law. But this country, the importance of Ukraine on a global map and also on European map goes beyond reforms. because the whole Europe will look differently if Russia succeeds here in Ukraine. Europe will lose one of its greatest potentials if Ukraine does not continue its way towards integrating with the European Union, because our people, our economy, our resources will eventually make Europe broader, stronger in a global competition. And transatlantic space, as you mentioned, the coalition of democracies will be stronger with Ukraine. And finally, I want to emphasize that this is the country where democratic values and principles do matter. This is the country, and there are very few other countries in vicinity that share the same approach. So yes, reforms are important, but we should not, equalize reforms and support to Ukraine. Speaking about the anti-corruption efforts, President Zelensky is absolutely committed to dismantling the bomb of vested interests in the country, and he has proved it with a number of recent steps. In particular, we have approached one of the decisive moments in our transformation exercise, which is the reform of the judiciary. Judiciary will be the most difficult reform Ukraine has had to undertake so far. It's extremely complicated because of the special status of judges in the system and the guarantees they enjoy. But no one believed we would succeed. President Zelensky would succeed in introducing the land market in Ukraine, because Ukraine was one of, I think, 5 countries in the world that did not allow private ownership for land. As absurd as it may sound, but this is the legacy of the Soviet system that was hard to get away from. No one believed this president and his administration would succeed, and despite unprecedented speculations, provocations, and opposition, this reform was introduced and is being implemented. So I have faith in the current efforts to approach the reform of the judiciary and to handle it appropriately, because it is really one of the weakest elements of our state machinery.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. And I think there you'll find a lot of agreement on that particular issue. Certainly, Ukraine is not the only country, even in the European bloc, that suffers from continued challenges to judicial independence. And with that, I want to take it over to Ambassador Volker to come in. We've been talking, of course, about the U.S.-Ukraine relationship now, but Europe continues to be and play an important part in shaping that relationship. As you said, Ukraine is in Europe. So Ambassador Volker, let me take it over to you to comment or ask a question of the minister.
Sure. Thank you so much, Alina. And I just wanted to follow up on what you were saying there, Mr. Minister, because you're absolutely right that Ukraine's success as a country and the need to support that success is critically important to the West. In addition to, not conditioned on reforms, but in addition to Ukraine executing those reforms, Ukraine's success in implementing reforms will make it better. Ukraine will perform successfully better, but nonetheless, you need that support. So I'm curious if you would characterize the kind of engagement and support you're getting from the European Union. I remember that the Maidan really began when the former president, Yanukovych, refused to proceed with an EU association agreement to the great unhappiness of the Ukrainian people. Where do you see the EU in its engagement with Ukraine, thinking of it that way?
Back in 2014, the European Union acted swiftly and efficiently, extending its hand to Ukraine. They provided us with a lot of advice, with a lot of financial resources. It is true they were pretty reluctant to engage in any military and security on military or security area, given the Russian context. But when it comes to reforms, when it comes to opening new opportunities for Ukraine's integration with the European Union and really helping us out in one of the most difficult moments of our history, yes, they were here. They were here, and that will always be remembered, and that will always be appreciated. The issue with Europe, though, and I want to, I hear from some people, including officials in the European Union, and they say it quietly, but they still do say it over lunch after a glass of wine. Perhaps we went too far in Ukraine in 2014, and we should have heard Russia. I think it's one of the most misleading narratives and approaches to Russia I have ever heard. It is true some elites in the European Union are still preoccupied with this question, but it's extremely misleading, and it's extremely damaging for the future of Europe. The Ukraine is a natural is a natural element of Europe's strength globally in the world. We do not enjoy privileges of full membership of the European Union, but we do take European system, European way of living and European principles as the foundations of our own nation and of our own country. So we will effectively evolve as a European country. Whether some forces in the European Union will continue the policy of kind of considering us only as a neighbor, or they will embrace us as full member of the family, that is a matter of time. But whatever their choice they will make, Ukraine will be successful. And the only question is whether the EU will benefit from that success, having Ukraine as full member, or we will benefit from our own success, having the European Union as our neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. That was a concrete, but also a strategic answer. And well, personally, I can agree with you more. Ukraine has been a country striving and fighting, and Ukrainians have died on the Maidan and also in the Donbass and elsewhere for fighting for their desire to be part of the Euro-Atlantic community. I want to be mindful of your time. I know you have a meeting with the president coming up very soon, and I wanted to ask a question from our friend and colleague, Ambassador Bill Taylor, who's at the U.S. Institute for Peace. And not sure if you'll be able to answer this one, but I'll ask you anyways. We understand that the new ambassador to the United States is set to take up her post in Washington soon, Ambassador Markarova. Can you tell us a bit more when she might be arriving in Washington, and also what her top priorities are likely to be when it comes to security, finance, and IMF?
Well, I'm happy that you're waiting for her, that you cannot wait to see her in Washington. That's a very good news. The top priority of Ambassador Markarova will be establishing active and trustful contacts with the new administration and filling our strategic partnership with very specific projects and undertakings along the lines which I outlined while answering your first question. But top priority number one is security, because without security, everything else, everything else depends on security. We need to ensure security of my country in order to successfully proceed with changes, transformations, and ambitious economic projects. And another top assignment she's given is to actually organize the visit of the President of the United States to Ukraine. We haven't had the pleasure of hosting a US president since 2008. And given the dynamics of our partnership and the role the United States have played in Ukraine since 2014, I believe it's high time to do that, especially given that this is a very special year for Ukraine. We celebrate the 30th anniversary of our independence, and we proved that our understanding of independence is the same as the American understanding of independence. Independence is something that you're always ready to fight for, because this is the starting point of everything. So yes, she will be instructed, and we will fire her if she does not succeed in bringing President Biden to Kyiv. I'm joking. Oksana, if you're listening, I'm joking.
Well, Mr. Minister, thank you so much. And yes, we are all awaiting, of course, the new ambassador. We worked very closely with the embassy here, and I'm really grateful to the cooperation from the current ambassador, Ambassador Yelchenko, and his entire team. Ukraine has had a history of having good ambassadors in Washington that have, I think, been able to achieve quite a lot to strengthen the US-Ukrainian relationship. And look forward to continuing to work with the new ambassador when she arrives. And I want to thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. It's really been a pleasure and an honor. And thank you to those of us in our audience who posed a question and who are here to listen in. Please follow us on Twitter at CEPA for more news on Ukraine, on Russia, and everything happening in the broader transatlantic region. Ambassador Volker, thank you so much for joining, for introducing the minister, and for being part of the SIPA team. And once again, Minister Kuleba, good luck. I hope that we do see a presidential visit to Kyiv as soon as the pandemic environment allows it. That would be an important step in the right direction, I think, by Washington, and also a very important signal of what Joe Biden himself, President Biden himself, has laid out in his speech at the Munich Security Conference about the vital importance of Ukraine for US national interests and broader transatlantic security. So thank you very much for joining us. I will let you go to your follow-up meeting. Thank you, Ambassador Volker, and goodbye.